Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Star Trek III, The Search For Spock. Now, this is a pretty interesting movie in my opinion, because this is really the first Star Trek movie where the Klingons are the main villains of the movie. Now, the Klingons only briefly showed up in the first one, they were briefly mentioned in the second one, but in this one, they're pretty much the main villains of the movie. Like, the main villain of the movie is a Klingon named Krug. I think that's his name, right? Krug, and he's played by Christopher Lloyd, who, of course, I know from Back to the Future. Now, and the film is also directed by Leonard Nimoy, who plays Spock, and I have to say that he does a pretty good job with directing the movie. I think this was his first theatrical movie. I believe before this he directed a little bit for television, but I think this was his first theatrical movie, and with directing, he actually does pretty well. And it's interesting that he directs this movie because originally he wanted out of the franchise because Spock, of course, and this is a spoiler, I'm gonna give away spoilers of what happened at the end of Wrath of Khan, but Spock dies at the end of Wrath of Khan. They bring him back in this one, but the whole reason they killed him off in the previous film is because Leonard Nimoy wanted out of the franchise, but they asked him to come back, and he also directed the movie, and like I said, I think he does a pretty good job with directing. If I were to have any complaint about it, I would say there's one shot in particular after a ship blows up, and the effects in this one particular scene to me looked a little cheap, but that's just it. Like, that's really my only problem with it. I think for the most part it's a very well directed movie, and this was also one of the first Star Trek movies I've ever seen. I think this may have actually been the first one that I ever saw. I think I saw this, I know I saw this before I saw Wrath of Khan. I think out of the films that feature the original cast of characters, I do believe this was the first one I ever saw. Now, let's get into the plot line. Now, the plot of the movie is it picks up where Wrath of Khan left off. Now, at the end of Wrath of Khan, Khan is defeated, and the main plot line of Wrath of Khan dealt with something called the Genesis device, which was a device that if launched at a lifeless planet, it would create life on that planet, and so at the end of the movie, the Genesis device is launched, and it creates a new planet, and Spock died at the end of Wrath of Khan. He actually sacrificed himself to save the lives of the rest of the crew, and at the end of the movie, after Spock's funeral, they put Spock's body on the Genesis planet. So this picks up right where that movie left off. The Enterprise is now heading home, but it turns out that McCoy is now being possessed by, his mind is now being taken over by the spirit and mind of Spock. It turns out that Spock's mind and soul is actually inside McCoy, and there's actually a really funny line that McCoy says when he realizes what's happening to him. He says, "This is punishment. He's getting revenge. He's getting revenge for all the arguments he's lost." I know I did a terrible DeForest Kelley impression, but what happens is Kirk eventually is greeted by Spock's father, who is actually pretty pissed that they left Spock's body on the Genesis planet, and it turns out that the only way to save McCoy's sanity, because it turns out that McCoy is going insane because he has Spock's mind and soul inside his mind, the only way to save McCoy's sanity and Spock's soul is they have to find Spock's body, go back to Vulcan, and there has to be a ritual performed which would take Spock's mind out of McCoy and put it back in Spock's body. And basically, Kirk, he tries to get permission from Starfleet to go to the Genesis planet, but they forbid it because they realize that the Genesis project, they realize that it could be used as a weapon, and really all information about the Genesis planet is classified, so really they forbid Kirk from going there. But eventually Kirk, Sulu, Chekhov, and Scotty, they take McCoy, and they end up stealing the Enterprise against Federation's orders, and they go out to the Genesis planet to try to find Spock. And while this is happening, two characters from the previous film, David, who you find out in the previous film is actually Kirk's son, and a female Vulcan named Saavik. I think I'm saying her name right, Saavik, I believe, and she was played by Kirstie Alley in the previous film. She's played by a different actress in this movie, but what happens is they were on the Genesis planet, and they actually find Spock on the planet, but when they find Spock, he's just a child, but he is alive though, and it turns out that the Genesis planet had some kind of effect on his cells where it actually regenerated him and brought him back to life, and now they find Spock but as a little boy, and his mind is like a complete void because of course his mind is now in McCoy, so really it's just like this mindless child version of Spock. But it turns out that Spock is now aging rapidly because it turns out that Spock and the Genesis planet are somehow connected, and the more Spock is aging, the planet is aging as well, and and they now have to get Spock off this planet. And what happens is these Klingons, this group of Klingons, they find out about the Genesis project, and now this Klingon named Krug, played by Christopher Lloyd, is now trying to get all the information he can on the Genesis project because he realizes that the Genesis device can be used as a weapon. And and that's really all I want to say about the plot line, but I really enjoyed Star Trek III, the Search for Spock. I think it's a very underrated Star Trek movie, and of course I don't agree with the whole odd and even thing with the whole Star Trek franchise, because I like Star Trek the motion picture and I like this movie. I'll get to what I think of Star Trek V when I get to that review, but yeah, I can honestly say I do enjoy this movie a lot. So one thing I do want to point out is I first saw this movie when I was a little kid, and I'm surprised I never picked up on the fact that the same guy who plays the villain in this movie is the same guy who played Doc Brown in Back to the Future. When I was a little kid and I saw this movie, I never picked up on that, but watching the movie now, I'm like, duh, that's the same freaking guy from Back to the Future. That's Doc Brown. But for some reason, when I was a little kid, I never picked up on it, even though it should have been obvious from like his voice and stuff. But yeah, like I said, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock is a very good movie, and bye.